Well, good afternoon. It's Benjamin Morgan, Chief Executive of the Aircraft Owners and Pilots Association of Australia. And today we're hosting a very special Friday afternoon Facebook Live session to discuss what is tragic news this afternoon, in that the New South Wales State Government have demanded the closure of Katoomba Airport by 5 p.m. On the 19th of November this year. The order from the New South Wales Government comes years following some fairly determined advocacy and efforts by the airfield operator FlyBlue and the two persons involved in that, Derek and Floyd Larson. Their efforts to try and protect Katoomba Airfield from being closed and finding themselves in a David versus Goliath battle up against what can only really be described as the environmental green movement versus common sense and the aviation industry. Now, this is a story that we've heard all too often right across Australia at just about every state and territory there is in this country. And I think it's very difficult in 2021 to deny that our airport infrastructure nationwide is at risk. It's at risk from a multitude of challenges, but none more prevalent than the environmental movement, who will stop at nothing to shut down Australia's airports. And so I'm joined today by Derek Larson. I'll just bring him in. Derek, obviously, g'day and welcome to this broadcast, and thank you very much for joining us on what must be an incredibly disappointing day for you and Floyd and for FlyBlue.
Yeah, thanks, Ben. Certainly confirm all of that. It's really a dark day for aviation and a dark day for Katoomba Airfield in the Blue Mountains, which has been part of the aviation community since 1968. It was formally agreed and with permitted use for the uses of general aviation, emergency services, and tourism. Those were the three things it was permitted for in 1968 lawfully.
Well, Derek, and this is the point, is that Katoomba Airfield has been around for around 50 odd years, actually 56 odd years, serving the community of New South Wales. And in recent years, of course, it's gone through a little bit of change. But it's been an airfield that has actually been incredibly important to the safety of general aviation transiting between the metropolitan Sydney and out beyond the Blue Mountains to the west, because we have no airports within that space other than Katoomba, which can serve as a field for emergency landing should an engine failure or worse occur.
Absolutely, Ben. And we shouldn't neglect to say that the Australian Defence Force have access to this airfield on an unfettered basis at all times. And I would say in the last 2 months, the Army and the Black Hawk helicopters have been training here 4 to 5 times over the last 2 months for their high altitude training. And that is part and parcel of what the original agreement was also about.
Well, Derek, the airfield came to be in the crosshairs of the environmental green movement within the Blue Mountains during a public consultation phase, which was run by the Department of Crown Lands, I believe. And that consultation was to take community feedback with respect to the airport. I mean, this is an airport that's been a staging ground for aerial firefighting. It's been a staging ground for military activities. It's been a long-standing, multi-decade foundational asset for the safety of general aviation. And through that public consult, we ended up in a situation where the airport was bombarded, or the Department of Land, was bombarded with responses by what was assessed to be literally tourists who were visiting the Blue Mountains, who had little to no involvement in the Blue Mountains at all, but were being coerced effectively into signing feedback to the Department of Crown Lands opposing the airport.
Absolutely, Ben. And the Commissioner of Crown Lands did a complete review of that process and confirmed everything that we said was happening. And that was that they did a quantitative review of the submissions, not a qualitative review. And so it just simply became down a numbers game. There were more people that got in these minority groups, as you know. They become very active, and they put in 1,300 submissions versus the 200 from aviation, but there was no validation or verification of those submissions. It was simply a numbers game.
Well, Derek, one of the things in this process, and AOPA has been involved on the sidelines of this issue from an advocacy perspective in supporting your application and seeking to support you navigating these processes with not only Crown Lands, but with the state government and the politicians involved. One of the things that astounds me in this case is that it appears that the issue of prior use is at the centre of the rejection by the New South Wales government, that they have failed to identify that there has in fact been a prior use of this site, 56 years, mind you, Derek, of this site being an airport. They've failed to recognise that this site has demonstrated prior use. And so based on their communication, which I might just refer to very quickly here, they're saying after a review, the department, this is the New South Wales Government, the Planning and Industry and Environment Department. So they're saying after a review, the department has determined that you have not satisfactorily demonstrated the existence of a viable planning pathway. I mean, your application simply laid forth that you were seeking to clean up the airport, improve the overall safety of the airport, make the airport more environmentally responsible than it currently is, addressing all the key issues in seeking to preserve and protect a 56-year veteran airport that is invaluable towards aviation safety, keeping the lives of pilots and passengers safe, and not only the local community safe against the ravages of bushfires and the wildlife and the fauna, but they have said to you that you have not been able to demonstrate a sufficient case for prior use. Is that correct?
That's correct. It's implausible.
I mean, I would be incredibly frustrated if I were you, Derek, and I understand, having worked alongside you for the past several years on this issue, I know how hard you have worked and what you've invested towards trying to make this work. It must just be an incredible frustration that our politicians are letting us down.
Yeah, I must say to you, Ben, it has been the most frustrating experience of our careers. We've had the ups and downs that sometimes you would feel like it was going in the right direction and you were getting good support. And then all of a sudden you'd hit another roadblock. And we consistently were provided with roadblocks at every turn. And I can say this honestly, there is not, in the 3 years since we provided our first lease proposal, we have not been engaged in any formal way with a discussion regarding our lease proposals. Not once has the department or the government engaged with us in a detailed, meaningful way with respect to our lease proposals.
Well, Derek, I would echo everything that you've just said there, because I know that in my 6 years with AOPA Australia, what I have found largely with respect to state and federal, local state and federal governments in this country is that they fail to engage. They do not engage on these issues. And in fact, I was watching something last night. I was watching a briefing last night out of the US, and a congressman in the United States was grilling their Attorney General. And he said, Mr. Attorney General, it appears that what you're focused on doing is doing and then saying to the people, oh, we'll consult once we've done it. And this is what we see as a repeating function here within the Australian context as well. Local, state and federal governments making decisions and then saying, well, we've made the decision now, but let's consult. Let's hear what you've got to say now that we've made the decision. And of course, it's too late once the decision's been made. It then requires a politician to backtrack. And we all know what politicians don't do well, which is to accept when they're wrong and to take accountability and responsibility. So it ends up being a foregone conclusion. So let me ask you the question. Do you feel that this is a foregone conclusion? Are we able to turn this around at this juncture?
Look, I think in reality there, Ben, I think it really comes down to public outcry. I'm not so sure that Floyd and I have done everything we possibly can. We are quite and absolutely 100% sure that we are on legally very, very firm ground, and that we have shown that this airfield has existing use rights, and it's been unbroken for the last 53 years. Or since 1991, when the LEP changed, that was the critical date. So we feel very strongly that we're on strong legal grounds. The issue then comes down to taking those avenues as we need to, if we were to go that route, or the other is to get the public opinion, the outcry of public opinion from the aviation community to simply stand up and say, this is just not going to be accepted any longer. Because this is a systemic issue that we have in both local and state governments as I see it today.
Well, Derek, you're absolutely correct. And you and I have had a huge degree of conversation on these issues. And I've had this conversation with many other people across the aviation industry. And I hope that our conversation today, again, going out to the aviation industry, serves as yet another wake-up reminder that we are in a war. This is a war against aviation infrastructure in this country. And whether it is a privatised airport leaseholder who is a multinational corporate that are raping and pillaging the aviation assets to their corporate profit advantage. And it's happening, ladies and gentlemen. It's happening at all of our major capital city airports. They are being raped. They're being raped for the value of commercial and non-aviation development, and aviation is being pushed further and further afield. And so airfields like Katoomba and Warnervale and the Oaks and Wollongong, they become critical and even more vital as the destruction of these capital city airports worsens. And so to see airports like Katoomba just being thrown to the wind and disregarded like this is just an absolute outrage. And I saw a comment that was just posted earlier, which is a really valid comment. And that is, the next time a major bushfire breaks out in the Blue Mountains, maybe aircraft owners and pilots, maybe the pilots flying our water bombers out there need to simply go on strike. Maybe the water bomber pilots need to stand with the industry at this point and say, we're not going to fight your fires. We're not going to go risk our lives for a bunch of people who want to close our airports down. And so if you want your houses protected, you want your fauna and your flora protected, how about you actually make an investment in protecting the airport infrastructure that's needed for us to be able to do our jobs? Derek?
Absolutely critical, Ben. Katoomba Airfield is probably one of the most important assets for aviation and for firefighting in general in the whole of Australia. As I said, Blue Mountains is the most fire-prone city in the country, and here we are closing down a major airfield. They're saying they will keep it open for emergency services. And can I just add, of recent, in the last, and I'll read this to you, Ben, the department has contacted the Civil Aviation Safety Authority. This is a document written by the department. CASA, New South Wales Rural Fire Service, National Parks and Wildlife Service, Transport for New South Wales, and Air Services Australia to determine the statutory or strategic need for the airfield to operate. Responses from CASA, RFS, National Parks and Wildlife and Transport for New South Wales were received. None agree with the Larson's assertion, that's out, FlyBlue's assertion, that the airfield is a strategic aviation site.
So hang on a second, Derek. Let me just get this right. The Civil Aviation Safety Authority, who spend their time ramming it down the throats of every participant in this industry that safety is the most important thing that it has to consider, put a submission into the New South Wales government saying that it couldn't agree that having an airfield located between the Sydney Metropolitan and the western reaches of the state, crossing the most dangerous mountain ranges there are in this country, said that there's no perceivable safety advantage in having that airfield located there. Is that correct?
That's exactly what I'm telling you, and that's exactly what is coming from a government document that we have.
Do we know, Derek, I'm going to jump in. Do we know who signed that document? Who in CASA signed that document?
I don't know. This has come out of the New South Wales government, and what they are saying is that they have had these discussions and that it's not with CASA and it's not a strategic aviation site. Can I just say, in 2004, we have documentation here, 2005, I just need to have a look at the dates, where CASA completely said, this is a strategic site, it should never be closed. So, going back only a few years ago, I think it was actually 2011, it might have even been since that time, CASA have given their advice in formal and in writing, and we have that document, saying that it is a strategic aviation site and should not be closed to general aviation. However, we are now being told that CASA don't care, and I don't have evidence of who said that in CASA, but it's certainly not my understanding.
Well, I think that it's incumbent upon us to submit some freedom of information requests, Derek, and we'll start pursuing that line, because I'd like to see whoever signed that document sacked and removed from the regulator. You know, and I want to make it clear: if you're a representative inside of the Civil Aviation Safety Authority, and you're being called on to provide information with respect to saving a bloody airport in this country that keeps our aviation industry working, and you sign a letter assisting the government in shutting down an airport, you deserve to be sacked. You deserve to be thrown out on your ass to fend for yourself off the government teat. It's nothing short of contemptuous. It's disgusting. I can't understand why we continue to come up against this kind of crap being fed out to the broader industry. And we've seen this take place. We saw this take place at Warnervale when CASA were called on to help provide advice as to why the trees need to be cut down on the approach. And CASA would not weigh in and provide a statement to say that it is obviously safer for the trees to be cut on the approach path to prevent an aircraft colliding with a tree on approach. And it is just, it defies belief, Derek. It defies belief to believe that we have a safety regulator so hell-bent for the past 50 years of ramming safety down the throat of every person in this industry. And when given the opportunity to support the industry and to stand with the airport operator trying to save this incredible location to keep pilots safe, and as Nick Rees is suggesting there in his comment, that Katoomba Airfield certainly reduces the pucker factor when flying VFR across that tiger country, how when given that opportunity, they would not step up to the plate and say, yes, it is actually quite vital.
I find it incredible, Ben, and as I said, this is the battle we've been having. It doesn't matter how hard we fought, we would find at every turn of the corner there was another reason why they shouldn't be sitting down with us and discussing how this airfield should become operational. And can I just say, Ben, and we have alluded to it in our press release, but for Blue Mountain City Council to suggest that by improving and maintaining and getting the main runway up to speed so aircraft can land, currently they can't, that would mean that it would be, in their view, an intensification of the use. Now, if someone can rationalise with me that every time you saw a grader out the front of your house or the local government employees digging a hole and fixing the road, that represented an intensification of the use. And as I said, Council have said, and we've said it in our press release, this has been told to us, and as I said, it's documented. We're not here presenting something that is not right. It's documented in government documents that Council have said they would take legal action if we were to move forward and try and repair the runway so it was operational. But as one of the precursors to winning the tender in 2017, some 4 years ago, a condition of that tender was that we redo the main runway and make it operational. So, you know, the simple fact of life is without a lease, you can't. Council have also said we're not the legal. If there's a dispute about existing use rights, you need to go to court, the Land and Environment Court. Well, can I just argue that who is going to go to the Land and Environment Court with no tenure?
No, it's a rigged game, mate. It's a rigged game, and the council clearly have the environmental lobby on their back, and the council have folded like a cheap set of cards because politically, to get themselves as councillors re-elected, they need to do that. So rather than having any fortitude and spine and standing up for what is needed to advance the nation build, and to protect the Blue Mountains and to protect the flora and the fauna and to protect communities by ensuring that this vital community asset receives the kind of operational management and upgrades that are needed, keeping in perspective here that I would love to ask whoever at CASA has provided this advice to the state government, I'd love to ask this question. So is a sealed runway safer for a water bomber to fly off than an unsealed runway? Answer that question, clown. And that's exactly what it is, clowns, utter clowns. How have these people infiltrated to hold positions inside of the safety regulator to be giving this kind of circus advice? Now, this language is pretty blunt, And unfortunately, this language is blunt in contrast to the fact that we're trying to work at the moment with CASA on a range of key issues. But by God, it gets awfully difficult to try and work with the regulator when this level of dumb keeps seeping out of that place in Canberra, and it needs to be fixed. These people need to be removed and gotten out of the system, because this is what's wrong with aviation. We've got politicians who are weak at the knees. We've got councillors that are virtually bought off by the environmental lobby or other interest groups, or God forbid, the bloody real estate developers who just love getting in there and influencing councils to close airports and turn them into housing estates. The whole system is busted. It is so broken, it's almost comical if it wasn't so serious and it wasn't so devastatingly sad. Derek?
Can't agree more, Ben. It's a very difficult time right now, and as I said, I think we've been tasked, as you rightly said earlier, that by the 19th of November, we've got to deconstruct all of the aviation safety gear at the airfield, the windsocks, the cameras, the weather stations, and remove all of it and take it away. And this is something that our aviators and our friends use every day of the week, crossing that Blue Mountains. So that will no longer be there come the 19th of November.
Well, Derek, on the 19th of November, I think I'm going to turn up with a camper van. I'm going to put a tent up. I'm just going to camp out on that site. And how about we refuse to leave? I mean, we're at a point now where, in all honesty, civil discussion with these departments, obedience with these departments has resulted in the steamrolling of our industry. At what point does the aviation industry sit back and say, well, Christ, if we don't actually start standing up and fighting, if we don't actually push back with any degree of seriousness, we're going to lose all of this stuff. We're not going to have airports left if we just keep sitting back and accepting that these outcomes are just what we have to accept.
Well, you're dealing with people, Ben, that have no aviation experience, knowledge, or expertise. None of them that are dealing with this matter understand the value of this strategic asset. None of them.
Incredibly sad, Derek, incredibly sad. Well, look, we're going to continue to work with you on this issue. Obviously, what you're faced with now is the question as to whether you want to take this to court. And I would imagine taking this to the Land and Environment Court is going to be an extremely expensive undertaking. Have you any information or idea as to what you would likely be looking at to try and save Katoomba for the aviation industry?
Oh, look, Ben, I wouldn't even want to put a figure on it. As I said, I just... at this point in time, it's only a week since we got this notice, so we'll decamp over the next couple of weeks and get out. But, yeah, I couldn't really comment, only on the basis that it's the last resort for us. It's never the first resort. It's tremendously emotionally draining, as you know, and materially draining, financially draining to do that type of thing. It requires a concerted effort from all of us. And I can rest assured that Floyd and I have the documentation, we have the evidence, we have everything that's required by anyone, we have. And we haven't left one stone unturned here because it's been a 4-year journey. And I just say that to receive a notice last Friday that says, please make arrangements to return the keys to the site by posting to us in Sydney. I mean, after 4 years of looking after this site, you are instructed to send the keys back to them and deconstruct all of your safety gear, walk away, take your goods and just get out. And that's the end of the story.
I don't know what to say, Derek. You know, dumb leading dumb. Where is Australia going if this is the best that we can do? I know I made this comment to you earlier, you know, and I mean no disrespect to any minority group in saying it, but, you know, the truth and reality is if you'd been marketing this as a transgender LGBTQ++ airport site for training, you know, pride flag carrying pilots, God love them, this site would have been saved. This site would have been protected. We would have had everyone racing racing to the barrel saying we can't let this airport close, but we're living in idiocracy. This is absolute insanity, what is going on. And I just can't believe, as a 42-year-old man, I cannot believe I am living in this country at this time with this kind of nonsense going on. We no longer have a focus on protecting national infrastructure. We're selling the country off at every opportunity we get. We're privatising everything from underneath the Australian people to multinationals who just want to rape and pillage and turn it into wholesale profits. And all along the way, the Australian people are getting screwed. And this is exactly what's happening. We are getting screwed by politicians who do not give a toss what happens, because they're not going to be around in 5 or 10 years to be held accountable. And I dare say that the people inside of the New South Wales government making the decision to stop this site being leased and improved and made safe so it can continue to provide safety, will those people be around to stand in the coroner's court if a fatal accident occurs because the site ends up closed? Will they be around to answer for their decisions? Will they be accountable for their decisions? And, you know, Derek, it's an esoteric question, because the realities are they're almost never around for their decisions. They escape. Correct. They escape everything. And yet we as an industry are expected to suck this up and put up with it. And I dare say we're fast arriving at a point where we can't do that any longer. Maybe some solutions here, Derek. The federal government needs to get off its arse. Barnaby Joyce, you might be a fantastic minister, but get off your ass and come out with a national statement regarding the value and importance of airports nationwide, and start making it clear to state governments that these airports are not to be bastardised. Come on, mate. Stand up for the country. Stand up for the industry. Stand up for hardworking men and women. Put your back into it. Do what you're there to do. Represent the damn country. Stand up. And CASA, do your damn job. Do your damn job. Stop playing games. Derek, as you can tell, I'm upset. I'm renowned for getting upset. I say exactly what I mean. I don't mince my words with it, because for too long, the aviation industry has sat back trying to play nice, and what's happened? We just get steamrolled. Time and time again, we're getting steamrolled. So I'd like to thank you very much for joining me here today. This is an absolutely god-awful outcome. I can't believe that so many years into this, we're now at this outcome. I'm shocked. I really did believe that when the last review process started, that common sense was going to prevail. I really believed when the New South Wales ministers had reached out to discuss this, that they genuinely meant to fix what the wrong here, which was the enablement of a fierce minority, an absolute minority of NIMBYs in the Blue Mountains who wanted to railroad this project because they care more about the tree in their backyard than they do the protection of the Blue Mountains Heritage Park. And think about that. That airport could save the entire park from going up in flames, and yet the NIMBYs have decided we don't want it.
Absolutely, Ben. Absolutely. And what shouldn't be lost on us is we've had tremendous support from the business community, tourism business community, outside of aviation. Those that rely on people coming in through the airfield, people, tours, four-wheel drive tours, the whole lot of them. We've had tremendous support. The hotels, we've had all the big hotels in the Blue Mountains. You name them, they're there. They're all supporting us. But that's fallen on deaf ears. We've had, as you know, we've had letters from all of these groups, from significant players. The highest private sector employers in the Blue Mountains have all written letters on our behalf, as has the aviation community and yourself specifically very strongly. We've all hand-delivered those letters to the ministers. We've hand-delivered them to the bureaucrats, and not one of them has issued a response, and not one of them has been acknowledged.
I'm not surprised, Derek. I'm not surprised. We're just told
this is what it is, lad. You don't have planning. If you go back and think about it, Ben, we won a tender for an airfield on merit that the government said had existed under existing use rights for the last 50 years, unbroken. We win the tender for an airfield. We are provided with a license pre a promise of a lease with respect to the only lawful purpose of that airfield is as an airfield. That's the only lawful purpose. And now they are telling us that if you are to do the runway up and in any way upgrade any infrastructure, we will stop you and potentially take you to court if you try to do that, because we would see that as an intensification of the use. And in the time that we've been here, there is not one iota of evidence to support the contrary view that existing use rights do not exist. Not one iota of documentary evidence to support that claim. And yet we've provided overwhelming evidence in support of the fact that existing use rights and a planning pathway exist.
I'm just getting, my mobile phone is just lighting up with text messages coming in from everybody, Derek, that are just absolutely, they're shocked. They're absolutely shocked and they're angry. And rightfully so, mate, rightfully so. It's a national disgrace as to what's gone on with our airports in this country. Nothing short of a national disgrace. And every single participant of this industry has the right to be offended at the most, incredibly offended with what's going on. You know, our aviation industry is expected to carry the back of the national economy. We're expected to be able to provide a backbone of transport, mass transport. We're expected to provide pilots. We're expected to provide aircraft. We're expected to provide engineers. And the government can't even get off its arse and protect our basic infrastructure that enables us to do that and to do it safely. And our regulators are asleep at the wheel, and our local councils and state and federal governments, quite frankly, are probably in on the act with the developers and any other group that wants to get rid of it, because let's face it, it's all about the money. Follow the money. Follow the money. $1.3 billion. Just remember this number. I can't keep saying this number enough. Remember it. $1.3 billion was just paid for Jandakot Airport. $1.3 billion. That was a site sold for how many million? 8 million, 9 million, 10 million, 12 million? $1.3 billion for your airport, ladies and gentlemen, the Australian taxpayer, our airport, sold to a multinational corporate property development company who quite openly rejoiced the fact that they looked at this opportunity salivating because of all the non-aviation development that's capable at the remaining 60% of that site. We have been raped and pillaged of our national infrastructure for nothing more than the exchange of money to greedy councils, to greedy property developers, and privatised airport operators who do not have the interests of the aviation industry at heart. Derek, thank you so much for coming along and for continuing your fight. I know that for you and your family, this has been a huge investment and a multi-year battle. As I said at the start, David versus Goliath. Anyone that has ever had the misfortune of finding themselves in a position where they have to fight against a local council, fight against a state government, or fight against a federal government would easily understand just how horrible the experience is, just how unbalanced the situation is. You as the Australian citizen, it's all on you. It's all on you to spend everything you own, everything you've ever earned, to try and battle bureaucrats, faceless bastards who take no risk in their decision making and ultimately take no bloody responsibility when the situation goes pear-shaped at the end, because they're nowhere to be seen. They are not accountable, they're not elected, and they are running this country. The bureaucracy has taken over. The politicians have to start getting off their asses and to start taking action to rein this government in at a federal, state and local level if we're to see any common sense in being able to advance our aviation industry. And I would say this to people across the aviation industry that say, hey, Ben, this issue, we don't have enough people in aviation. We're not important enough. You're banging on with this issue. You're never going to get hurt. Do you think that this is not going on in just about every other industry segment there is in the country? Now, I have the pleasure of speaking with the unions in other sectors and other industry peak bodies and associations. And here's the wake-up call. It's happening everywhere. This is going on right across the system. And so we've got a federal election looming. There is a federal election coming. And here is my recommendation to you. As someone that has fought for you for 6 years in this industry, and I've put myself out there publicly and I've fought on all of these issues, and hopefully you trust me enough on these issues that you would listen to what I've got to say. We need to return the favour to these people and make sure at the next federal election we vote for anyone other than the Liberal, Nationals, or the Labor Party. Let's give up this bullshit, Holden versus Ford, same car with different coloured stripes in the same race chasing each other, taking turns at holding the lead, playing the same game, delivering the same busted policies and the same busted outcomes, and we need to say to them, thanks, but no thanks. Or these incumbents, the Liberal National Government, need to get off their backsides and actually start taking the issues of aviation seriously and start addressing the problems and identifying that our infrastructure is not there for the a la carte eating of large property developers and those that would have the industry destroyed, and start implementing policies and legislation to protect it. As I said, ladies and gentlemen, the choice is going to be yours. You either keep voting to put this crap in, and we keep having to fight it and find ourselves in a diminishing war of no return, or you take action at the next election and talk to every last person that you know and you convince them that we just can't keep supporting this type of political outcome. Now, regardless of who the minor party is, I'm not telling you which one to vote for. There's plenty of those parties out there. But I believe at the next federal election, which is looming, you have no choice but to deliver an outstanding message to the federal government, which is we're just not going to put up with this anymore. The corruption that's going on in state government, the corruption that's going on at a federal level, the corruption that goes on at a local level, it's out of control. And unfortunately, the aviation industry's caught in it. Derek?
Yeah, so Ben, and it must not be forgotten that we have been given notice to get out of this airfield on the 19th of November. The local government elections in New South Wales take place the first week of December. So that cannot be lost in terms of, the timing.
Look, Derek, I'm reminded everywhere I go. Everyone says to me, Ben, aviation's a very conservative industry, and aircraft owners and pilots, they're not going to do much. They don't want to put their head above the parapet. And I understand why. Let me tell you, as somebody I have been on the receiving end of this, I know absolutely why nobody in the aviation industry wants to put their head up. They'll take a swing at you. They'll take a swing at you. They try to blacklist you. They try to blackball you out of meetings. They try to stop you getting access to certain department representatives or politicians' offices. They play dirty. Understand something. They play so dirty against us as an industry. Do you really want to vote these people back in? And I've got to be honest. I don't think I really don't see that they could really do much at this point in time to show that they could actually solve these problems, because they've done nothing for 30, 50 years. It's just been getting worse and worse and worse. And so, Derek, I just feel so sorry for you and your family. I lament all of the money that you've invested to try and do the right thing by the aviation industry and try to protect that site, to provide safety for the aviation industry, just to be undermined by the safety regulator and to be undermined by council representatives who are not thinking about the broader issues. They're just allowing their self-interest to rule the day. It's sad. We're living in a very sad time, and I think it's going to take a very big political shift in order for these problems to be seriously fixed. So thank you for joining me. I've said enough. Yeah. I'm already guaranteeing I've got a pile of messages coming in saying, oh my God, you said what? It has to be said. It's what everyone's thinking. It's time it's just said. So Derek, thank you.
Thank you, Ben. Much appreciated.